the notion of choice is probably a good segue to accomplishment. What's important to us? What do we choose to achieve?
Absolutely. So within the context of accomplishment in the course, we, among others, we explore the concept of willpower as studied by psychologist Kelly McGonigal. And we also discuss ways to cultivate sustainable willpower so we can achieve goals that we most want to achieve in life in a way that's healthy and sustainable indeed. And we also discuss what it means to possess grit, or the ability to persevere, as studied by psychologist Angela Duckworth, whom you mentioned earlier. And we do 2 exercises to test our grit. And in addition, we also explore a method to successfully achieve goals based on a book that I wrote, which I'm currently translating from Dutch into English.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, as a 7, I would say, I'm just going to guess here, and I'm going to pick on myself, I guess, as a type 7, is I think 7s probably stand furthest away from grit as their kind of natural way of being. But what's also true, at least in my case, is tremendous willpower when I want it. And I love McGonigal's work. I love how the concept you can actually build willpower. So the brain science on this is fairly demonstrative that you can build willpower. You can build a brain that actually gets better at impulse control, impulse resistance over time, at really focusing on the achievement of what you want and sticking with it. And of course, Angela Duckworth's work on the way in which you then stick with it, which is one of the things we try to pass on to our children. And that's the hard part. Like, how do you train the kids for grit? But it's something we're working on constantly, because the kids don't want to have grit. They don't want to play the piano one more time or do the jujitsu one more time or whatever. So it's a constant resistance.
Yeah. And I could imagine that, I don't know how this is for you, Rob, but that for this generation growing up with all of the distractions, that it might be even more difficult, because, for instance, smartphones are so easy to pick up, and then you're down a rabbit hole instead of perhaps indeed practicing something that you would actually prefer doing. So what's your experience with children and indeed distractions?
Well, as we know, even adults are failing at this. You have a very hard time fighting the experiment or the power of an AI-based algorithm that can learn in real time and be deployed across an experiment of 1.5 billion people, like you can with Facebook. So if you just think about that's what's on the other side of your experience, it's no wonder they're winning, because that's a very hard thing to match your individual psychology against when that's what's coming at you. So my belief on this for 10 years, ever since I did my TED talk to some degree on this, it was actually on a whole bunch of things, but this was one of the components, was, you can't expect your 11-year-old to win that battle when even your self-aware 35-year-old can't win the battle. So what you need to do is you need to create an environment where, to some degree, you're protecting that, until developmentally the capacity for the impulse control, the capacity for the constant feedbacks that are the notifications, the constant dopamine hits that are the likes on Facebook or whatever it is, Instagram or whatever the kids are using now. There's a time and a place for them to transition developmentally, I think, into that. But by the way, this is not just apply to the kids; it applies to us too. As you say, it's like we're all distracted with this crap, and it does become a practice of vigilance with respect to saying, okay, did I just and I use Twitter. I'm not on Facebook, haven't been for years, but I am on Twitter. So I'm constantly asking myself, what's the give and take here? Did Twitter make me its tool? Or is Twitter my tool? I'm constantly in that question. I'm constantly reminding my friends and followers on Twitter of that exact question. Like, we need to use these platforms as tools. We need to not become their tools. And that requires a level of self-awareness. And again, not to plug the course, but just generally speaking about integral life and integral life practice more broadly, like this is the level of self-awareness I think we need to have as adults. And we need to, speaking about kids, pass on to kids. We need to help our kids have almost like a proto ILP, so they can start to cultivate the skills of self-awareness that say, have I given up my agency here? Am I still an autonomous agent that has its own dignity, its own self-worth in this system that wants to turn me into basically just another component of attention in their business model? That's tricky, and that's certainly, I mean, clearly we see that is one of the things hurting society and democracies and all these other things. So it's a life condition that we're having to serve.
Yeah. Well, that's a very very lucid take on that, and I think indeed, if we're speaking about accomplishment, then that's one of the confounding factors of achieving goals, is if there's indeed if there are distractions that are engineered to distract us, like Tristan Harris says, indeed, with all of these very smart people designing addictive tech. So
that's right.